She stayed like that, screaming and trying to fight her way out for over 24 hours, trying to get anybody's attention, but nobody heard her. 16-year-old Neysi Perez climbed out of her bed and she began carefully walking across the room where her other relatives were sleeping on the floor as she moved towards the back of the house. She pushed open the back door and she stepped out into the hot night air, and then she made the familiar walk across her backyard toward the outhouse. But Neysi would never reach the outhouse. Neysi lived in a town called La Entrada, which is located in one of the poorest and most dangerous countries in the world, Honduras. But despite the harshness of her reality, Neysi was pretty happy. She had recently married the boy she was in love with. His name was Rudy, and the two of them were both very excited about their first child, which was due in a matter of months. The next morning, Neysi's mother woke up first. Her name was Maria, and as she passed by the back door, she looked outside and she saw Neysi lying on the ground. And so Maria, she screams, she runs outside to her daughter and she flips her over and she's looking at her, and Neysi is unresponsive and she's foaming at the mouth. Now, they're in a part of the world where healthcare was not top-notch, not even close. And Honduras is known for being an extremely religious part of the world. And so Maria did not think, oh, I should send my daughter to the hospital. Instead, Maria and the rest of Neysi's family decided to call a priest to perform an exorcism because the belief was Neysi must be possessed with demons. And so a priest was hailed to the residence, and the priest would perform an exorcism on Neysi, but it wouldn't do anything. And so at that point, Maria and the rest of Neysi's family would take Neysi, who was still totally unresponsive and foaming, to the local hospital. But by that point, it was too late. Neysi was dead. When Neysi's family asked the doctors what happened to her, they said they didn't know. And so, heartbroken and confused, Maria and the rest of Neysi's family brought Neysi back home. They had an ad hoc memorial service, and then they buried her. The following day, Neysi's husband, Rudy, who was totally distraught because he has not only lost his wife, he's also lost his unborn child. He got up early and he just had to go to the cemetery to be with his wife. And so he made his way over to the local cemetery and he found his wife's gravesite. Neysi had not been buried under the earth. Instead, she had been placed into a coffin, and that coffin had been slid into this big hollowed out cement block that was as big as a coffin. And then once the coffin was slid inside, they walled up the opening. And so Rudy finds Neysi's cement block, and he goes up right next to it, and he leans up against it, and he begins to quietly sob. But just seconds later, he would hear something in that cemetery that would cause him to go completely silent, stand up, and sprint away. The day before, approximately 1 or 2 hours after Neysi's coffin was slid inside of that cement tomb and walled up, Neysi woke up. She was never dead. It's unclear what originally caused Neysi to collapse outside of her house on the way to the outhouse, but the two leading theories are, 1, she had a severe panic attack caused by a nearby gunshot, or 2, she had a severe episode of cataplexy. Cataplexy is the sudden, uncontrollable loss of muscle function, often brought on by very strong emotions. A mild case could be just having your knees buckle for a second. A severe case, which is what they believe could have happened to Neysi, would result in basically complete paralysis. But whatever the case was, the doctors at the hospital got it wrong. When Neysi was brought to them, she was not dead. And so when she woke up inside of her coffin that was encased in cement, she even managed to force her hands up near her head, and she shattered the glass window that sat in her coffin that looked right down at her face. She broke the glass, but it didn't help her at all because, again, it's just cement on the other side. And so glass shards fell into her mouth and into her eyes. And so she stayed like that, screaming and trying to fight her way out for over 24 hours, trying to get anybody's attention, but nobody heard her. Until her husband, Rudy, he leaned up against her tomb and he put his ear right up against the cement and began to cry. And that's when he heard, through the cement, the sound of his wife calling out for help. Rudy instantly ran and got help, and he and his family came back, and they broke open the side of this tomb, and they pulled Neysi's coffin out, and even though she was now unresponsive, she had a faint heartbeat, and so they rushed her to the hospital, but by the time she got there, she really had died. Neysi had finally just run out of oxygen, likely within minutes of her husband finally hearing her screams.